Started on the last one. Hi everyone, I'm Shelli Reeves, and I run an organization called Reframe History that's dedicated to keeping stories alive through archiving the past, recording the present, and advocating for the future. And my inspiration really comes from the lack of representation, which will be a theme throughout the entire presentation. When I was in high school, I really felt as though I had a distorted story of self purely because I wasn't having examples of people like me who were doing things I was really interested in. And so when I learned about the National Museum of African American History and Culture groundbreaking, I took a one-way ticket to DC and I got this jar of dirt from the very bottom of the hole where they were digging to put the museum, and later had several internships there, and one of my mentors is there as well. And in many ways, there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. And so my primary goal is to try and figure out how to share those stories and how to uplift everyone in everyone's story. And in the United States, although people really love to talk about and share Black history, only about 1 to 2 lessons or 8 to 9% of total class time is dedicated to Black history. And as a result of that, the stories that are being told often aren't stories about the people who are in our backyards or the history that's really dear to us. It's the heavy hitters, MLK, Malcolm X. And so really thinking about what are the stories that we're sharing and what are the stories that impact us the most. And so I not only try to make the stories more accessible, but I do this in a virtual way and create virtual exhibitions, and I'm working on an app right now. And so, although we talk about these very specific moments, revolution is not a one-time event. It's something that is ongoing, and it takes all of us coming together to try and not only uplift stories, but to share our own story. And so much of that is representation. When we don't have representation, we are only seeing less than half of the picture because there are not only not enough highlighting of women artists and African American artists, but if you think about Black women artists, it's even smaller. And it's really causing a disadvantage to society. And also, we're seeing that women artists are earning so much less money in the art world as well. And thinking about the larger concept that if we didn't have the uplifting and saying that African American women are really important through our K through 12 education, some people are going to not think about that, right? It's not at the forefront as we're moving through society and questioning who do we represent? It becomes internalized. And in the prices of the art that's getting sold by women artists specifically are not selling at that same rate, and it's because of some of the same things with representation. And continuing another chart from ArtNet. So when we create out of our own experiences, we have to develop those structures that will present and circulate our culture. And so throughout history, African American women have created our own spaces to prosper and share the art that we're creating and to share the stories that we are developing. And sometimes it's living outside of the traditional canon, sometimes it's living within. But I talked with 3 people who are 3 African American women in Cleveland, Ohio, which I will share a little bit more about, who are all creating those spaces and work in a light of representation, sometimes within systems, sometimes outside of them. And very much every woman that I have ever known has made a lasting impression on my soul, and the 3 people that I'm going to share with you are the exact same. They have made such an important impression. So we have Selena Higginbottom. Selena is a portrait photographer. Actually, all three people that I'll talk about are portrait photographers. And she really highlights and focuses in on the portrait as a means of uplifting and highlighting individuals. And when I asked her what representation is to her, she said that it's seeing people who look like me in spaces meant for art and beauty, and everywhere in between. And that the opportunities being given to artists are across all different people. So artists that look just like her. So this is one of her pieces. And representation is important to her because it opens doors for younger generations and those doors that was once shut. And so as we're moving through our lifetime, ensuring that more young people are seeing more people who look like us creating in the spaces. Another one of her pieces. And for her, representation really shows that there is a place for us. Second person is Asia Joy, who I am actually creating a Black artist space with. So hers is about spaces. This is Asia. And so when she thinks about representation, it's very much making a space that has varying perspectives from different cultures and experiences and letting them come together as a group and have really frank, open conversations. And also it's having representation in our direct communities, the people that we see and the people that we are interacting with, not just on a social platform or, you know, in a more digital way. Like, who are the people in our communities? And this is one of her pieces. And so for her, as she was growing up, she didn't have the representation similar to myself, and she spent a lot of time researching and finding people who looked like her and creating art and seeing what were they doing and how can she mimic it. And as a result of that, she is a teacher and a mentor, and she teaches photography at a local photography studio. And it's so that she can be a resource for young people of color who are growing up and saying, especially young Black femmes, that's what she said, so that there are examples and also that she can share the resources that she at first struggled to find. And representation to her is really important because it is the ability to inspire. And it really inspires her to see Black women in so many different types of spaces, and seeing Black women who are holding their own, who are continuing to be authentically themselves and not assimilating to different spaces. And so she hopes that through the way that she's representing people, that she is validating and a part of the evolution as we move forward. And then Amber Ford is Amber. And for Amber, representation is that everyone is considered the standard, that there isn't the Black or the woman categories, that it is more equity generally. And a quote from her is that it's devastating to do a Google search for something in particular and have to put Black in front of it in order to see yourself and what you're searching for. And she did a series called In Between, where she really looked at the in-between of Black people, thinking specifically about like young and old and different places in our lives. And she said that representation is important because it's different between the feeling like you belong as a child and feeling like you're a mistake or that you're bad or that something's wrong with you. And so she creates images of specifically of Black people about Black people to show the beauty, and she wants to show strength and just the realness through her images. And so this is an image that she took of me for one of her recent series that are focused on power and hair. And thinking about how everyone talked about representation, and even how Reframe history in many ways was started because of the lack of representation in my own life, is very different to be on the other side of the lens and sitting and seeing how someone represents me and seeing how that is so impactful. So speaking to all of the women and looking up all the research, there is this really interesting and intimate relationship between being represented and how does that feel, and working and creating pathways so that there are avenues to continue to uplift and share stories that in the past have not easily been found, but hopefully in the future will be easily found with some of my work and work of colleagues and other people who inspire me every single day. And that is it for me.